Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll get started with the next session, which is one of the game changers we're going to discuss today in the context of sustainability and the SDGs. I'm David Pringle. I'm a special advisor to Science Business, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. And we're going to look in particular at the role of big data and all that comes with that: AI, supercomputers, connectivity, Internet of Things, etc. We're basically going to get a lot more data from a lot more sources, and we have a lot more tools to process that data. You can almost think of them as power tools. And so we have an opportunity to accelerate, do better research at a micro level, but also we have a greater ability to track and coordinate research at a macro level and actually coordinate our efforts to tackle the SDGs and the sustainability challenges that the world faces. So we potentially have a big opportunity here to utilize these tools, but of course, like anything in life, this is not necessarily going to be straightforward. So to unpick this, I have an expert panel, which is going to join me on stage. I'll invite them up one by one. If I can start with Meijer. He's Rector of the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Helen, please join the stage. Next, we have Maarja Kruusmaa. She's Vice Rector for Research at Tallinn University of Technology. Maarja, please join the stage. We also have Nick Fowler. He's the Chief Academic Officer at Elsevier. And joining us online is Per Öster. He's the Director of the Advanced Computing Facility of CSC IT Centre for Science. And there he is, in glorious Technicolor. And looks like he's got a good connection. You just want to say hello, Per, just to check you're audible? Perhaps not. Per, can you hear us? Or okay. Well, okay. Is there a slight delay maybe on the line? Okay, just while we're sorting that out, I'm going to just explain how we'll run the session, and then we'll get started with the actual meat of the topic. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to just make a few minutes of opening remarks, and this is just an opportunity to introduce themselves and frame the discussion, give you a sense of where they're coming from and the opportunities they see around big data in scientific research. So that will be just 3 or 4 minutes from each panelist. So we'll then get into a conversation. We're going to talk about some of the different angles and aspects of this and look for concrete examples of where big data is making a difference. And then we'll leave some room for an audience Q&A towards the end. So I'll just check whether Per can hear us. Per, can you hear us?
Yes,
you can. Excellent. And you have audio as well. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to, logically, actually, well, let's start with Per, because he would be in that seat, and we'll work our way back. I'll just sit down. So, Per, if you could just give us your opening introduction, just a few minutes. We're going to go around the panel, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay. So, as I was introduced here, I'm Per Öster from CSC IT Centre for Science in Finland. And I'm not an AI bot, but I claim that, but you can prove that's not the case during this meeting. This CSC IT Centre for Science,
Per, we seem to have lost your audio.
Number 3 in the world.
Okay. Per, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, we're losing your audio there, actually.
Oh.
We might have to try the camera off technique I think we used in the previous session. Should we see if that works better, or? That's a good plan. Per?
Good plan.
Per, do you want to try doing your opening remarks with your camera off? We've all seen what you look like now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Now you know how it looks, and that's enough, I think. Is this better?
Yeah, you seem to be coming through a bit better. Maybe Okay, Per, we can't hear you.
Here at CEC.
Okay. Per, if you can hear me, I think what we'll do, if you don't mind, we'll try and get these issues sorted out and then come back to you. Maybe we'll have you as the final speaker. All right, let's, sorry about this, let's switch to Nick. And as I say, Per, if you can hear us, we'll come back to you at the end of the speakers. Nick, sorry, would you mind taking over?
All right, thank you. There's a pattern here, I detect. Yeah, so like my colleague who spoke earlier, I'm from Elsevier, which is part of RELX, and we're a global information analytics company. And our mission is to help researchers and healthcare professionals advance science and improve health for the benefit of society. So we aim to provide universities, funding bodies, government research departments with insights that can actually inform decision making. And increasingly those decisions are about sustainability. They're about how to maximize social, economic, and environmental impact. And the SDGs, which we've talked about a lot, they provide an invaluable framework to set goals and also to monitor research, educational, and commercial activity to measure progress against outcomes. So as food for thought, I thought I'd describe 3 ways in which we're using data and analytics to help advance SDGs. So the first one is actually to map research activity by SDGs. So we can classify 87 million research outputs, which we have in a Scopus database, using text mining, algorithms, and machine learning modules that we've actually co-developed with the research community, for example, the Aurora network of universities in Europe. And because of this, we know, for example, that the growth rate of articles published relating to SDGs is 2, 3, 4 times greater than the average growth rate of all other articles. So, for example, Zero Hunger for the last 4 years, SDG 2, had a growth rate of 14%. Even the slowest growth rate, SDG 16, was 8%, and that compares to around 3.5% for the average. In terms of the volume of research, we know that the most SDG-related research is being done in SDG 3, health, SDG 7, energy, and SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. We know that the EU 27 is best in terms of most citations to it, in terms of climate and also in terms of responsible consumption. And we also know that the EU is most collaborative, and especially corporate academic collaboration in energy. So that's just a real skating across the surface of the kinds of insights we can get from mapping research activity to SDGs. The second area in which we're working is actually to connect SDG activity to outcomes. So it's one thing to be able to say there's lots of research being done in this SDG, or there's lots of funding going to it, or even there are lots of patents coming from it, but that's still really mapping activity. It's not actually mapping outcomes. So one of the projects that we've been working on collaboratively is with the University of Tasmania in Australia, where there we've actually been gathering information about outcomes. So are people living longer lives? Are carbon emissions reducing? Is society becoming more equitable? And actually then using that data to focus on where the university itself can prioritize what to work on, also based on its own strengths. And that's one of the reasons this university became #1 in terms of climate action rankings globally by Times Higher in 2022. The last area in which I'll talk about data and analytics relates to skills. So we've been working with another Australian university in Queensland University of Technology. We've heard a lot about the need to reform research assessment. We've been looking at data to consider a much broader view of researchers and academics. So looking at to what extent are they nurturing other academics? So do we see evidence that they are nurturing? What is the gender mix of the academics that they are nurturing? Have they taken career breaks, for example, to raise family or to take care of elderly relatives? And how do we ensure they're not penalized for that? So trying to get a much rounder picture. And within that context, we're also working with data science institutes at universities, such as in Amsterdam, which itself is creating jobs, creating a lot of internships. So there's 3 areas of food for thought that I thought would help get us kicked off, and I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, that's great. No, we'll come back to some of those, Nick, actually, so thanks for setting the scene for us. I see Per's reappeared, but let's stay with the room for the moment. Maarja, let's hear from you. Let's set the scene with
Thank you very much. Actually, I was coming here and I knew I have this panel going on about is big data and AI useful for research and change a game. And I thought that I didn't know what to say, so yesterday in the evening in a hotel, I was asking GPT chat to answer my question. Let me read it to you. Yes, algorithms and analytics play a significant role in the field of AI and big data. With increased amount of data generated every day, the ability to browse and analyze it is crucial. Algorithms and analytics help to extract valuable insights from the data, which can inform decision-making and drive innovation. Additionally, advances in AI technologies such as machine learning and deep learning have enabled algorithms to learn patterns and make predictions about more accurately, further enhancing the impact of analytics in various industries.
Okay.
So we can end the session because the answer is here already. But on the other hand, would you expect AI today to tell you that AI is not useful? I don't think so, right? So it's just doing the job, right?
Yeah. It's a good self-publicist.
Yeah, exactly. So in my real life, I'm actually a researcher who most of the time spends collecting data. I do underwater robotics, and I go to places where it's very hard to get data, such as in the bottom of the sea or under the glaciers or places like that. So I know exactly this data is actually very expensive. To get good data is very expensive. And as apart from what GPT chat tells me, I think it's not all okay with how we collect data and how to analyze data. And I would specifically address one problem or opportunity, which is raw data and raw data quality. So we have huge chunks of data, but you know, this thing here, if it takes data that is not good quality and runs its algorithms on that, this actually is AI hallucinating in an imaginary world, right? Because the data is corrupt, the data is partial, the data is whatever. And I didn't know how big the problem is. Just scanning it yesterday, I got into a editorial in a journal called Molecular Brain, and the editor says that he rejects papers based on that there is no raw data. And then when he asks raw data, or she asks raw data, then half of the authors withdraw their manuscripts, which kind of tells you something about how many of the researchers base the research really on a good quality raw data.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, we will come back to that theme.
Exactly. So that's my 2 cents to the next of the
thank you.
conversation.
Okay. Geleyn, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Geleyn Meijer. I'm the rector of the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. We are a leading university playing in the field of academic, making it applied, understanding what society may use of it, and then bringing those questions again back. Particularly when we focus on AI, I would say big data is already a little bit old word. That we have used this word, and if you think of it in historical terms, we used to first have grid computing. Somebody may still know this in the audience. That was basically to connect everything, and then the next step was actually, if we connect, then we can maybe fill our databases, which is big data. But then what you do with all that, and that is AI, basically, to make sense out of it. And what we are now slowly embarking on, we can discuss that, is that we need to design solutions. That's exactly where we are. So we are working very closely together with the academic research universities in the city, but also nationwide. And let's say where they have their scholars on new algorithms and researching on material science, I'll give some examples later, we take that on board and apply that into legal professions or health professions, exactly as you say. So what does it mean to use all that stuff? Maybe one example is a project called Wood Circle.
Okay.
And about 50% of all the material used in our society, at least in the West, comes from construction. So it's building. And a lot of it is about wood is used on a large scale, and actually the recycling tour of wood is usually it's scrapped. So old wood is usually either, if it's not burnt, it's scrapped and it's used in parks and places and all that. So can you maybe analyze all that wood which comes out of old buildings and analyze the structure, the shape, And can you then maybe reuse it? So you need sensor systems, you need robotic systems to see these huge piles of wood. So you can get a feeling of the things we do. We go there, and we then go there with sensor systems, and we analyze those piles of wood. And then actually we look at designs which can actually have to make use of that wood again. So instead of having the cycle all the way down to scrap and then maybe grow trees again, we try to reuse and make that circle smaller. So I think that's quite an example of the type of service we do.
Yeah, okay, no, that's a good one. We'll definitely come back to that. Per, I'm going to hopefully give you another opportunity to set the scene for us. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, I can hear you okay. And,
Good, we can hear you, so carry on.
That's very good. So I did some changes here on my side now, so let's see if this is better. So as I was introduced, I'm from CSC, IT Center for Science in Finland, and where we, among other things, host EuroHPC's first pre-exascale in the world, actually.
Per, I don't know if you can hear us, but
Background here. It's. Shall I turn off my camera here?
Let's give that a try if you don't mind. Sorry.
We try this. I was asked to put on the camera. So if this works better.
We can hear you okay, no moment. So carry on.
Carry on. Yes. So the question here was that posed for this session was concerning big data for sustainability. Will new approaches, analytics change the game? And the short answer is, of course, yes, indeed. And what I understood from the rest of the panel, we agreed on this so far. Of course, there are many examples that can be put here. If you take from our side here, we are now involved in the destination.
Okay, Per, again, I don't know if you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Okay, I think in the interest of not losing too much time, let's...
If it doesn't work.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay. Oh, you're back again?
I'm back again, but if it's coming and goes like this, it's very difficult to talk, really, to give a consistent speech here. But I was saying that for the Destination Earth here, we are now working with an example, the Destination Earth the Climate Adaptation Digital Twin, where AI, or specifically machine learning, is a key component. And you can list a number of these examples for all the data spaces, for example, where artificial intelligence and machine learning will be a very important tool to get maximal.
Go again. Right, Per, unfortunately we've lost you again. If you
hear that?
Oh. Okay, I think what we'll do... Per, sorry, you've cut out again, unfortunately. I think what we'll do is, if you don't mind, we'll carry on with the panel conversation. We'll see if we can sort out the technology at our end and your end, and hopefully bring you back in at later on.
I'm on a wired line here, and it shouldn't be too much hassle on this side, I think. That's...
Okay, all right. We'll see if we can do anything about it at this end. But if you don't mind, we'll have a conversation in the room, and we'll try you again in a little bit and see if you're any better.
Okay.
Sorry, folks. Well, let's start with you, actually, because I'm really interested, first of all, in your view on whether we're going to get some kind of acceleration in scientific progress as a result of these new tools that we've got. Are we actually going to see some kind of great leap forward in terms of the speed of research?
Well, let's say I will say some critical notes, but let me start with the good news, I would say. I think we make fantastic progress, for instance, if you look at material science. Take the example of the cooling systems we're using. We know that a big chunk of the CO2 gases, the greenhouse gases, are coming from the gases we use in our refrigerators and particularly in our air conditioners. So there's quite a bit of research, materials research, on can we use solid-state materials who also can be used as a heat pump. This is a technical story, but let's say this is really going on. This is fundamental research into materials. And the same thing holds for new forms of batteries. Can we make organic batteries, so without the rare earth materials? So this is typically a type of science which is looking at an enormous amount of materials. They need to understand these materials. The crystal shape is very deep down techie stuff. And they then need to understand how the interactions between atoms is actually working. So idea is to simulate that. Actually, you cannot do that with the amount of computing power you would need. So what is currently taking place, and this is really a breakthrough, you apply deep learning technologies to get a data source of what quantum effects usually are appearing. And if you have this effect, what other effects might appear. So by having a large learning set on effects of quantum physics, you can actually make already a kind of selection of materials which might be kind of promising. So you're reducing an enormous amount of lead time in looking for promising materials.
Right.
And already you see that coming up now. So I think that is a good news of where, as you said in your title, where AI and big data is really bringing us a step ahead.
Okay. Is that bad news or?
Well, no. I think that's the good news. But this is not involving people at all at the moment.
Right.
So where it comes to people, where we really want to make a change in terms of our society, how people are using it, we have to look at a different scale.
Yeah.
So look at when we are living in a socio-technological society. If you look at our health systems, I mean, we use technology, but we have people, so we found a balance. We have food systems where we have a balance. If we want to make a transition into something which is sustainable, we have to change that balance. And these are hugely complex systems as well. So we have to kind of factor in the human side. We have to go for a human AI. And this is, again, such a complex side that there you need learning techniques as well. But do we really understand what the human factor is? And I would totally agree with what you said about, well, you made a quote from this tool, which we all discussed now lately. In my university, this is the talk of the day. Our teachers, can we do away with teaching and all that? Which is, of course, nonsense. Because if you really make a step deeper in understanding what's going on, you see that it's just a database. It's a smart way to select probability and sentences in a database. But the database itself, you have to question that. Who made that? Is it until today, or is it, and it's not? Is the European knowledge inside? I think that's a question too. So I think that's where we are touching the boundaries, and we should be really careful.
Yeah, okay, no, that's clear. Maarja, turning back to your opening remarks and this question of raw data and getting better raw data, do we now have the tools to get better data and better quality data? Is there a great leap forward?
We do have tools, but we're not using them. For example, to check data accuracy, integrity, data reliability, raw data, we, for example, could use quite simple technologies such as timestamping data. For example, I collect my data, I put a timestamp on it, and nobody knows I never manipulated it afterwards. Everybody can go back to my original data, but we're not using it. So we could use blockchain. But blockchain is expensive, computational expensive. We don't have to go into this one. But I think one thing really we can do with AI tools is that we make AI tools to guarantee that we keep eye on how the data was processed, analyzed, manipulated, if you want. So it would be, for example, suppose you had like automatic tools for p-picking, P-picking is that you adjust the p-values in a way that they would confirm your hypothesis. And it's quite, people do it sometimes unconsciously, but they do it, right? Yeah.
Generous interpretation.
Yes, but I think actually have automatic tools like that is not that impossible to do. If we can come up with that, like ChatGPT, right? So it's actually doable. So yeah, the answer is yes, but we can also ask GPT that.
So you're saying the tools are there, but we haven't necessarily applied them properly yet.
Yes, yes.
And actually,
so.
this is it's partly to Gelyn's point. It's partly about the interface with human beings, and actually putting them to use in that way. Yeah. Okay. No, interesting. Nick, I wanted to come back to your view of can we now coordinate research better? Can we get a better picture of what's going on at a macro level and say, okay, we're not doing enough over here and we're doing too much over there. Have we made a big step forward on that, in your view?
I think it's the potential to make big steps forwards is there, and I think, but the steps so far are incremental. Still, when we talk to, for example, funding bodies, they're not systematically looking to see what other funding bodies are doing before they decide what to fund. Okay. But increasingly, that is starting to happen. And they also, and also, so just commenting on that, is there potential for science to accelerate? Obviously, tools such as AI enable great possibilities, but there's still constraints such as funding and the ability of people to work together, to collaborate, especially given geopolitical factors. So it's a complex environment, and getting back to the point about funders, they have finite resources, they have finite funding, they have finite people, so they need to make choices. And the choices they're making is using increasingly analytics to see where are we strong, where are we distinctive, where if we just gave a little bit more funding, would we actually have competitive advantage, and where is not the current hot thing, but the next hot thing. So looking for analytics that provide predictive, emerging fields, where the entity concerned could be distinctively strong on a global stage. We're starting to see that thinking emerge, but it's very difficult to do even for one institution, let alone looking at what other institutions are doing when they're doing the same thing. So in summary, the potential's there, but it's very early stages.
Yeah. So as you say, incremental steps at this point, not the big leap forward. Per, if you're there, I'm gonna try you again, and I'm just really gonna ask you about what impact you see the new generation of supercomputers having on scientific research. Again, are we gonna see a big acceleration here? Let's give it a go, Per.
Okay, let's try again. We have done a number of sound tests now with the technicians here, so let's see. Yes, I think, it is very much about computer capacity here. We are now seeing like chatbots are very hot these days. I mean, there are new announcements here every day, and the debate is going on their benefits. But it's enormous of computing power that you need to do the language models and training for these chatbots and other applications like this. And there are several issues here I see for the future if to make this available for research in general. Because, for example, the language models, they are trained on web data. And here it is really only the big platforms, the Googles, Baidu, Microsoft, etc., that have access to this web data.
Okay, Per, we've lost you again. Can you hear us? Okay, I think we got the... Oh, try again, Per. Oh, I can hear him talking down there, actually.
We should, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe we should skip this.
Well, Per, I think we got the gist of that, actually, and I'm just going to build on that with the room, if I may, actually, because it does...
Okay, yes, go ahead.
It does lead me to quite an important point, which is whether, there's going to be this inequitable access to these digital tools. I mean, Per mentioned the big tech platforms having an inherent advantage, and I think one of the questions going forward is, can we ensure that all researchers get access to the tools and data that they need? I mean, let's start with you on this, Geleyn.
Well, I think that's a really important point which Per made. It is really about making sure that what we are doing here in Europe, and let's say the countries we'd like to work with, that all that data has been fed into these environments where we then, with the proper AI tools, take information out. So I would say, let's say that the culture, and I mean it in a wide sense, so that's technology, that's the social thing, that's the politics, that's the humanics elements, are really in balance in those big data sets which we're using. I think that's what you also was mentioning. And then we have to maintain that as well, and allow people to get there in an open access manner. We discussed this in the last panel as well. I think that is really key. Yeah. Otherwise you have the haves and the have-nots. I'm very afraid that if we are not making sure that we have enough access by all researchers, so that is also including the ones which are coming maybe from a different discipline, who have not used this before. Yeah? Everybody needs to understand what's at stake here. Otherwise we get fake science. We get people who are saying stuff which is actually not true. And I think the hope is actually at your end then, that you can kind of filter out where kind of outliers in science are made, because that's the only thing we left on.
Yeah, actually, well, let's get Nick to respond to that, actually, because it's an important point, and then we'll come to you, Maarja. Are you able to, at a macro level, figure out our resources being, well, as Geleyn says, is there some kind of challenge around tracking the quality of research? Is the quality of research being concentrated in particular areas and other areas are losing out? Do you have that sort of picture, as it were?
So, well, I spoke about the sort of what we see in terms of SDGs and the quality there, being in certain areas and where Europe's strong and others. But to your question about costs, at least the information industry, so if you think of the journal publishing industry, but also book publishing, databases like Scopus, analytical tools based on top of it, it's generally about less than 1% of the total cost of doing research. So the information industry is what we define ourselves as about 10 billion in its entirety globally. Academic and government research is about 500 billion. Right? So the 10 billion to 500 billion is well less than 1%. So our view is that because of the filtering that we do, because of and there's something like a less than 0.03 retraction rate of articles that are published, so it's very, very small in terms of that which are found to need to be retracted from the scientific record afterwards at the moment, although there are increasing risks, as you're pointing out. That is a very small cost overall of the total business, but our aspiration is that it actually drives the productivity of the rest. Then you have to ensure, as I think we're saying now and we're saying in the previous session, that there is universal access to that content. So under a subscription model, the easy thing to do is waive the subscriptions. As increasingly articles are published open access, then that means waiving gold open access fees, which is essentially what publishers are doing. But there are mechanisms to ensure that to enable equality under both models, and that's what we are committed to doing.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Maarja, what about? Do you see a digital divide on another level? And this is about access to the research tools. So, and whether there's as I say, the access to supercomputers or the data that you want in terms of the raw research, as the cost of that access rises, is there a risk that some researchers get left behind? Is that something that you're concerned about?
I'm not sure that cost of processing data is the biggest cost in doing research. As I said, acquiring data is really, really costly when you go to experimental science.
Yeah.
So accessing data and doing metadata research is actually less costly than that.
Yeah, okay.
So I would think it would even reduce the costs for some areas which do not have expensive research facilities for experimental research. And they don't have to travel to the other part of the planet in order to do their experiments. They can actually work on experimental results which are available already. So maybe instead that would be a little bit of rather like a leveling factor.
Okay, so no reasons for optimism. Okay, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think that, yes, there is this question about, as I say, the concentration, particularly in the big tech platforms, of the data and the tools necessarily, but maybe only in particular areas of research. So, but we need, in the interest of time, let's move to a different topic, which is basically around, Nick mentioned this earlier on, but ensuring actually that researchers nurture other researchers and that we cultivate this talent pool. Now, this has been a long-standing question, and we obviously need data science skills these days, and in being able to interpret AI, etc. Do we have the solutions in place, or do we need to think differently about how we train scientists and how we reward them and how we recognize them? So let's start with you, Geleyn. It's a big topic, but if you have interesting ideas, put them out.
Well, let's say I think all areas of science are being touched by this. So there is really, and this is already going on for a decade or more. So there is no science which is actually untouched. I would say the basic thing is to make people who are in any field, is it linguistics or is it medicine or is it economics? I mean, big things are happening there as well. People need to know their statistics. So if there is one particular topic people don't understand is what statistics are doing, because that's really at the core of all these tools. p-values which you tune or not tune. I think that there are some fantastic ways to actually take people along, even if they don't have an interest in the deep down technology. That is still what we need to teach, so that people feel empowered to use this.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I think what is really key is that we understand that there are ethical, legal, and societal aspects of all these technologies, and they cannot be untouched. Maybe the example of the materials, which I just gave, you can still say that's a kind of isolated thing that happens there in the lab, and materials come out. But we want to do something with the materials. We want to create new tools. Let's take the refrigerator. We need to design a refrigerator which is working with solid-state cooling materials. And then how does it look like? Where do you buy it? How does the circle look like? So again, very quickly you come into this area of ethical stuff, of legal stuff, what is allowed, what is not allowed. And I think that needs to be taught to researchers at the early stage.
Well, let's hear from the rest of the panel. Is that actually feasible, given the pressures on our education systems, the pressures on our public budgets, etc.? Can we give scientists the breadth of education they potentially need?
I cannot but agree about the statistics, but I would add math and physics to that, because this is how our models are normally working, whatever we do. And you were talking here about deep learning on your wood material and molecular simulations and stuff like that. So what we need from future and today's research is to understand whether, these models are going into a right direction, to have a sense of, physical world, and how reliable this data is. And it actually becomes really, really risky when you're in previous panels, you talked about risks and talked about shocks and crises. And in these times, you really need to have data really fast. You don't have much time to sit on that. And data explainability, easy way to explain data, difficult data to people. On COVID, there are 200,000 papers during COVID published.
Right.
200,000, who goes through all that and who gets something feasible out of that? So instead of just having tools doing that, you need to train your researchers of having critical minds.
Yeah. Okay.
Questioning what kind of models and results those algorithms are throwing up to you.
Yeah. And if you're using some automated system to process all those research papers, understanding what that's giving you.
Yeah.
At the other end. Nick, let's a slightly different question to you around the talent pool, really, and to what extent is the scientific community actually missing a lot of talent in your view, or are we losing researchers? Are we losing talent because of blockages in the system, I guess?
Are we losing talent from the research?
Yeah, I mean, particularly in you mentioned, for example, women and nurturing, the next generation, etc. The way the system works today, there's not necessarily always the incentives in place to pull that through.
Within academia, I think, losing it to corporate, I mean...
particularly, yeah.
Okay, I mean... And to complete the picture, I was talking about 500 billion of spending in academic and government. There's another 1.2 trillion in corporate. So depending on, I would see the corporate as part of the larger R&D community. It's a good question. We're doing increased analytics to see whether researchers, alumni of universities are going into academia versus into corporate. It's too early a stage at this point to be able to make generalizations, but suffice it to say that startups, tech companies are increasingly attractive places for data scientists to go. So I suspect your hypothesis could well be true, but I don't have the data to bear it out at this stage.
Yeah, I'm partly thinking we see this in the City of London, but if you're going into financial services, if you're a statistician or a data scientist, there's not necessarily sustainability research or the big challenges. But it would be an interesting picture to get. Per, are you...
I'm still with you.
Hi, Per. Just a quick question to you. Let's hear your thoughts on. Have you any ideas about how we, bring basically tap the resources, both human and financial resources, better than we are doing today, so that we actually take advantage of these digital tools that we have? Are there blockages in the system that you can identify?
That's a hard question, really. but I think that it's very much for, I mean, it is publicly funded, many of these things that we are asking for here. And then we, from the research side, need to have a very good offering to the public funders. And that is always the case. And I think I come back to my baby now, EuroHPC here. I mean, this has been cooking for more than a decade, that at some point it would be common European investments in large-scale high-performance computing. And but it really takes time to work and convince. And when the time is right, the argumentation and the offering is right, there will be opportunities in this way. And then, of course, with talents, it is to have the right offerings to people and incentives. And if I could say, I was once in front of in a computer science conference, maybe 500 people in the audience, and we were just discussing why is it so few female in the audience here. And I said, yeah, about 45% of you guys shouldn't be here. There should be a woman here instead, yeah? Because that is more talented and smarter. This is obvious from pure statistics. So what is wrong here?
Yeah. Okay. No, and unfortunately that does continue, doesn't it? I think. Now, I want to leave some time for a bit of audience Q&A, but I just want to hear particularly what we think policymakers should be doing around data and AI. So we've got a number of initiatives in Europe. We've got the AI Act, we've got the Common Data Spaces, we've got the Digital Services Act. There's all sorts of things going on. But are policymakers putting too many obstacles in the way and not incentivizing enough, or are they not putting enough obstacles in the way? Is the balance of regulation in Europe and elsewhere about right from a scientific research perspective? And let's get your view on that.
Well, I think we can be very happy that we have a very conscious legislative system and policy making, and that we really think about the human aspect. So the human AI aspect is definitely nurtured here in Europe, and I think I know from discussions with American counterparts that they were really like, oh, okay, how do you do this? So you're not just putting all the data on a heap and everybody can get there. You're really thinking about how you do this, and I think this is really something we should cherish.
Yeah, right.
And then we haven't touched upon the issue of human capital. We mentioned it a little bit, but I think that is where we should be really worried. Because we are all designing solutions, whether it's for the SDGs or it's for other stuff. But where do we get the people who do this? So, and I think we really have to rethink the way we approach these big challenges and start with the question, where is the human talent? And how can we educate them? And at which level? In which level do they appreciate this? And how can we skill them up? It was already mentioned in the previous session, and also I think in the policy session on the skills aspect. I think their policy making can actually be of quite a help.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you're less concerned about the regulation. It's more about that talent, the human capital.
Yes.
Yeah. Maarja, I don't know if you've looked at the common data spaces and the way the EU is trying to facilitate that data sharing. Are you optimistic about that?
More or less. It's a little bit tricky question. Of course, there are very good initiatives. Earlier today, we were hearing about Destination Earth, a wonderful initiative.
Per was mentioning, I think. But,
putting all the data together for people to find and run their models or do whatever investigations, digital twins, other like that. And interoperability between different data sets is really important. Definitely, Europe should get their mind across GDPR in the right way. We have GDPR, which is right. We're good at data protection. We do that, but sometimes we really interpret it in a wrong way, which prevents us from sharing data, and we got this also on a political level understandings that if we share data, we can't do it because we have this act. Well, I come from Estonia. We've been sharing data from 30 years now, and completely safety. We have our anonymized, pseudonymized data. Nothing is going anywhere, but it's how do you build the data infrastructure so that sharing data would be safe and it's doable. I can tell you because I come from a country when it's done for 30 years and nobody is losing their data. So if Europe could benefit from that and look into that example, then I think it's not that difficult, actually.
Yeah. Okay, as you say, I think GDPR is sometimes used almost as a safety blanket rather than necessarily.
It is a safety blanket, but not necessarily if we interpret it in a wrong way.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Nick, just coming to you. I mean, do policymakers really grasp the opportunity here around data-driven science, do you think?
Well, one thing we've observed, we did a survey of 3,000 researchers last year called Confidence in Research to understand how researchers feel about research, and we specifically asked them about communicating with policymakers, and the vast majority of them aren't confident communicating with policymakers. They want to, so they may be doing data science-driven research in pertaining to SDGs, but then actually feel very lacking in terms of the ability to communicate that to the public and to policymakers specifically. So one thing that could be done is to facilitate that bridge, whether it's training, communication purposes, but just building that bridge between what actually research is finding so that it actually makes it into the world of policy and practice.
Yeah, there's something of a chasm right now, potentially, yeah. Okay. Per, you've reappeared on our screen, so you were touched on Destination Earth earlier, and I was actually going to ask you, do you see that as a template for public-private cooperation and data sharing and moving science forward?
Well, in a way, I mean, the concept of digital twins has become a template in the sense that its implementation will be very different from area to area. But this more holistic view on to combine streaming data, simulated data, experimental results, and then into large-scale simulation with visualization, interactive use, and tools for the researchers that they can really interact and work with the data in a almost seamless way. All kind of different data here, and that is a template in a way for those who need to be implemented in very different ways for different areas.
Yeah, sorry, just on that topic of digital twins, I think you were going to mention it in your opening remarks, but does that link to the metaverse, etc.? Do you see opportunities around actually doing science in the metaverse, in this kind of three-dimensional interactive environment?
No.
Well, glad we're clear on that.
To be honest, I've been working with virtual reality many years back now. And I think it is actually not so. There is a reason that three-dimensional movies and so on that's not caught up as a big thing. I mean, it's a nice, fantastic experience once, but because 3D happens in our brain and our perception of it, and that is enough. And we have learned to understand our world without being simulated once more. So it is usually more annoying than helping, actually.
Yeah, okay. Not a fan of the metaverse or VR.
No, I'm not a fan of that. I think it's a dead end, actually.
If there are any questions from the audience, let's take them now. I do want to ask the panel very quickly how they see the future of this area, but if we have questions, let's take them right now. There's one at the front here. I think we have microphones. Yeah, it's just coming on this one here, and then one. Oh, there's quite a few questions. We're going to start at the front, actually, if you don't mind, just because he got his hand up first. But
Hello, I'm Frank of the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And I was wondering about the concept of data commons. You didn't talk about that, but you might share data under conditions that make it much more easier to actually access them and use them for the public good. And what is your stance on that?
Who'd like to take that?
Well, I'll address the general point that publishers have a role to encourage researchers to make their data sets available. And we've been trying to do that for the best part of a decade now, and still we're stuck at around 5 to 10% of articles have data sets associated with them, whether we're simply suggesting a link to a repository somewhere, whether data commons or a simple institutional repository. So there's some barrier that needs to be overcome in order for that to happen. But from a publisher's point of view, we absolutely support that and have been trying to drive it. But I'm not quite sure why it is we're stuck at such low levels after such a long time.
But I mean, it's also a way like to overcome the fact that data is so much targeted, so much attached to a person, whereas you might say that, for example, for healthcare purposes or other like sustainability research, you might pool that data into larger structures and then give the commons, so the people, an actual stake and also leverage in how that data is being used. And that might solve some of the questions that were posed by you and you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it ties into the question we had in the last session on citizen science. I think if you say if ownership of the data is held by a larger group, it's a little bit the idea of blockchain, but then a human blockchain basically to maintain consistency and reliability of data. I think that's where the power is.
And potentially the common data spaces play in that direction, potentially. I think there's a few questions here. Yeah, the gentleman who's got the microphone.
Thanks. Peter Bauer again. Hi, Per. It's a question to you. Do you see the role of centers like yours change actually in the future? Because, opposite to the past where you deployed a research job on your big computer and then ran away with the data, now with that data becoming immovable, basically everything has to happen where you are, not just then the data analytics and storage, but in the end, the entire service provision. Or what's it going to be in the future for you, for example?
Let's say I think we really have to move away from the idea that we have fundamental science looking at data and data sets and then transferring the kind of insights into an engineering disciplines and then transferring it to either entrepreneurship or marketing. This is the traditional kind of silos we are talking about. And I think, especially around data, and this is changing. You would like to have the entrepreneur having access to the big data sources. So you need to actually break down the silos. This is kind of my job as a policymaker for a university, actually to do away with the silos between the fundamental research capacities and the applied science and the engineering and entrepreneurship side. So I see this, especially on data, I see these communities actually taking a much more holistic approach. And I think that is the real game changer in the way we are organized. I hope this answers a little bit of your question.
My question was more for Per, actually.
Sorry,
I think he wants to hear from Per on this topic, but we can hear from both. Per, did you hear the question okay?
Yeah, I heard the question, and I agree with the answer also. But and definitely so. I mean, that of course, these very large computational resources, they become like magnets for data. And we see it already here with our site that it will be investments to put specific large data sets there that are repeatedly used and continuously built up for research use. And but here also we need a larger architecture in the sense that we need to be able to move around larger amount of data to different sites, because everything can't be in one place. It will not be the case. Yeah? So, and also the way and architectures of these, because traditionally these HPC centers was just batch-oriented, as Peter said here, batch-oriented simulations that you put the job in the queue, wait a week, and then you get the result back. But what we have now and what we have with Lumi, we try to build a more complete architecture where you have cloud computing capacity. You can put your containers there with complex workflows that can involve both pre and post processing, some visualization in the end, combine different data sources. And part of it is a large scale batch job that is more traditional HPC then. But that kind of architecture is necessary to serve all these different kind of research that we see are now coming and use, and they are in need of this large scale and more. It's large scale computing, but as part of more complex workflows, really.
Okay, Per, if you don't mind, thank you for that, but we'll leave it there because we've got a couple more questions and we're running short of time. There's a lady here with the microphone.
Hello, my name is Maarja Sigutin. I represent EPFL, Switzerland, and I will be very short. My question is about energy efficiency of AI and energy efficiency of high-performance computing. What do your institutions or your researchers do to improve energy efficiency? Thank you.
Who would like to take that?
Per?
Go on, Per. You got your hand up.
Yes. So, yes, we are addressing, but you need to address it on several levels. As you see the picture behind me, it tries to convey the cool and cold place where we have our beautiful facility in Kajaani, 600 kilometers north of Helsinki, in the middle of Finland, where we can use free cooling almost all around the year. So that is, and what we can do also, you have to take measures when you build your data center. What we have done, we can deliver excess heat back to the city so that you can heat the city, basically households within the city with that. And then, of course, it is about having efficient applications and be efficient with your computing. And that is an area where you need to, one will, of course, constantly can improve. And then you have a lot of work on the actual technology, that the processes and the way you are processing become more efficient. And there, of course, the computer vendors have made a lot of advancements during the last decade.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll unfortunately have to end the Q&A there. I'm just going to, as a way of conclusion and wrapping up, I'm just going to ask the audience, the panel, for a very quick summary of when we think we will see a great leap forward. We started by saying we've got this opportunity here, but I think you were saying we still haven't actually, we've got some of the fundamentals in place, but we haven't made that transition to where we're really harnessing the science. So at the risk of sticking your neck out, if you could give us a time frame as to when we might see this kind of acceleration in scientific progress. Start with you, Geleyn.
Well, let's say, I would say 5 years.
5 years, okay.
And I'm saying that because I think the generation of researchers which is now being educated in all those different disciplines, I think that the whole notion of AI and what it actually entails is really at the forefront. That combined with what I see is a generation of younger people who are really motivated to solve the issues of our sustainability issue. I was the only one who raised my hand that I think we're moving somewhere with the SDGs. Of course, we never get there in the way it's been formulated right now, but I do see that something is happening, and that's because of the new generation taking up that challenge. So that is basically my answer. Maybe not a technological answer, but that's because I just see people want this, and they want it in a balanced way. They want to understand it.
Yep. Now, at some stage, we potentially reach a tipping point. So, yeah, it could well happen. Maarja, what's your time frame?
Yeah, I would even say that might happen faster than we think. Like with the same thing, GPT chat. Like we kind of, everybody knew kind of it was coming, but the exact moment nobody was kind of predicting. It was suddenly there, and then everybody said, wow, what are we doing now? So I think with all this big data applications, something similar would happen. We're kind of anticipating it's going to happen, but we don't know exactly the right moment what it's going to be. But it could be sooner than we think.
Okay, interesting. Some optimism here. Nick?
I'm not going to give you a straight answer. I see, of course, the potential for the acceleration of knowledge generation. But to me, it's only relevant in the context of the outcomes that we need to achieve. So you can have more and more knowledge, and it can gain traction more intensively. But the real question is it going to bring us back to the SDGs? Is it sufficient in order to become applied to make a difference to SDGs? And somehow I think no matter how fast it accelerates, at least in the next 10, 20, 30 years, the SDG problem is going to be faster than it.
If I can summarize that, so you're quite optimistic on the knowledge side, you're less optimistic on the actual applying it.
That would have been a more succinct answer.
Well, but no, very clear. No, thank you. Per, we come to you last. In terms of a great leap forward, when do you see it happening?
By the end of the week, I would say. No, I think I'm not sure that we will see this. The leaps are seldom so visible. but I see it happens every day now. Things that we are progressing very rapidly, and it is an accelerating progress that it has been now for a couple of hundred years or so, and because it's every day new discoveries, new things comes up, and we build on each other, and it's hard to see the big leaps here. But it's definitely so that we get new tools available every day, and I see researchers are very quick to pick them up and find new use and innovate new use. And if one believes that basic research, R&D, and innovation is necessary to reach these sustainability goals, then I think we see progress every day, really.
It's a snowball rolling down the hill, I think is what you're describing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Per. We are actually out of time. I want to thank the speakers for their insights. It's been great. And thank you to you, Per, as well, for bearing with the technology, and the rest of the panel for bearing with the technology. I know that
Thank you for bearing with me.
I know that made it somewhat difficult, but thanks again to the speakers. If you could just join me in a round of applause. And I'll welcome Maryline back to the stage. Sorry for overrunning slightly. Would you like us to?